Hey folks, welcome back to DIY Net. What I'm going to do today is install a magnetic switch on our table saw jointer combination. What this does is, if the power goes out, it disconnects the machine from the incoming line voltage so that if you accidentally leave it on, it will not turn on. You have to push the off button again to reset it. So this is a safety device. So let's go ahead and install this. So this is the combination jointer and table saw, which will be the subject of an eventual restoration project. But for today, I need to get the jointer going because I got some work to do on some trim for the kitchen. I'm going to mount the magnetic switch down here, and by putting it there this way, I'm using the table saw, I can just bump my leg into it to shut it off if something happens. And over here with the jointer, I can do the same with the other leg, so that's a good spot for it. So let's go ahead and get that started. I'm going to put that right here. There's two holes in the box right here. I'm going to use those. I think over time that may loosen up. When I do the restoration on the machines here, I will probably come up with a little bit better mount for it, but for the time being it should be okay. So I'm just going to drive two screws up through there. Actually, that's on there pretty sturdy. It may hold better than I thought it was going to. Put this in from the back. Now, this doesn't matter, but one side is the surface is wider than the other one. It doesn't make any difference which way you put it, but just as a matter of good practice, I put the wider side against the box so that there's a little more surface area on that, creating the friction. Let us, I'm going to strip this before I put it in there so I don't have to make it a little bit easier on myself. Is that right about there? So just got to be careful with this. Just use your utility knife, but you don't want to cut into the conductors, because then you'll have to rewire back to the motor, because this is going to be too short, then I'll have to cut it back. So I want to be careful about that. You can use a wire stripping device for, if this is, where did I put it? Show you what it looks like. You can use one of these if you're using normal Romex cable. If you put it on there, it'll take the jacket right off. But this has got rubber on it, and this has a rubber jacket on it, and it will not take it off with that particular tool. So you got to cut it carefully. And the reason it's probably not actually rubber. It's some kind of oil-resistant material. So you want to make sure that if you're doing any kind of machines, wiring any kind of machines, you use the cable with this kind of jacket on it. Since this is 240 volts, this motor, I don't have to worry about, only need the two conductors. We've got the black and the white here. The reason for that is because the two sides of the two legs coming in on 240 volt are out of phase. So what happens is the putting that on backwards. What happens is when one side is on, the other side is off, and that acts as the neutral going back to the panel. So on a 240 volt setup, you do not need a neutral. So we're using the white wire, which would normally be the neutral. We're using it here as the second hot leg going in there. If you put the screwdriver, a situation like this where you're coming in from the back of the box, I could have put the connector in first and then fed it through, but then I would have had to go underneath there to connect that, to tighten the screws. So it's just easier to do it this way. Put the screws in, put the connector on first, and then I can tighten the locking ring from the front, and I won't have to climb under there and do anything about it's the wrong size. Won't have to go in there upside down to try to tighten this. Just makes it a little bit easier. Any way you can save a little labor and a little bending and twisting, especially when you get to be my age, is a good thing. So you always look for little opportunities like that to save yourself a little work. And you just put this on. Tighten it down. They're not made precisely, so sometimes it's a little tricky to get the nut started. They used to be made a little better. Everything's cheap nowadays, you know. So, and let's see if I can lower you a little bit. What you do is just take the screwdriver and a pair of pliers or something to hammer it with. Catch the edge of one of those little tabs on there and tighten that up. So that's the power to the motor, and so this will be the incoming line, and we're going to do the same thing with that. And the wires need to be at least 6 inches to the back where they come in. You can do longer. I bought deep boxes so we'd have a little room to work in there. So you can do longer if you want to, but you shouldn't do shorter than that, because then it makes it very difficult to wire the device up. You've got no room to work. So, and in fact, this is not going to be inspected because it's not house wiring. But if you're working in the house and the inspector came along, they would fail that for having wires that were too short. So we don't want to do that. So I said, just be careful when you're cutting that. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I nicked that a little bit. But that's okay, because that's near the end where we're going to strip it back anyway. So doesn't matter. Get rid of the jacket. And I think I mentioned in a previous video, I might have mentioned that these pieces of paper in here have something to do with the manufacturing process. They serve no purpose, so you just get them out of the way. Just snip them off. So let's see, can we get that in? Yeah, I think so. What's the other side look like? That was very odd. They usually pop right out when you tap them. That one was then you snap it off like that. It was stubborn. Okay, so we'll do the same thing on this. We'll put the connector on it before we shove it through the back of the box, just to make life easier for us. Be careful when you're doing this. Some boxes have a 2 different size knockouts, because if you need a bigger connector to put a bigger cable through there, you would need to use the other knockout. So make sure that you use the correct knockout when you're doing that. Forget what size knockouts they are at this point. I think the smaller one is called a 3/8 knockout, because there's a 3/8 hole in the connector. But I may be wrong about that. I don't remember off the top of my head. You want to position those the connector on the back. Turn it, clock at the right point so you can get to the screws. If for any reason in the future you need to take that take the wire out of it, just for convenience. All right, and again, we just push that around. I always use the pliers to do this, but you could obviously use a hammer also if you wanted to. All right, so that's done. Now, what I always do is try to get the grounds out of the way, because we're not connecting them to the switch. So let's get just want to get them taken care of and tucked into the back of the box. Where is my? There we go. It's very handy to have a wire stripper like this. So we're going to take off about roughly an inch or so of this. Twist those together, and you always want to twist clockwise, because when you put a wire nut on there, that goes clockwise, tightens clockwise, and you don't want to unwind that as you twist them together. So always go that way. And I'll take a separate piece of wire, and I'm going to make what they call a pigtail. And what this is going to do is I'm going to screw this to the box, and that will ground the box. If this was an outlet, there would be a ground screw on the outlet or switch, but since this is a magnetic switch, it doesn't have a ground on it. Typically they don't. They do not provide the ground screw with the box, so you have to fix them up. And what I normally do is I usually buy a bag of them because I use them, and much cheaper. I don't even know if they sell them individually. They may not. So you take the screw, you make a loop in the wire like that, take the screw, put it in there, and then you take your pliers and close the loop. This way it can't come loose. And there is, I don't know if you can see it or not, there's a spot on the box that has a threaded hole in it. And what you do is you put this in there, and that will ground the box. So you just tighten it up. Alright, so that's that. And we'll cut this. Cut this. We'll put this together. You always want to twist the wires together so that when the nut goes on there, it catches them all. You can, in theory, just shove the wires into the wire nut without doing this, but I never do it. I always always twist them. I think it's a better practice. If you don't, so we're done with that. Tuck that back in there so it's not in the way. The switch has spade terminals on the back of it, so we can't just most of the devices, wiring devices in your house have screws in them. So, but this has a spade terminal, so we're going to have to put some of the proper connectors on the back of the wires. And in this case, the yellow coated ones usually give you put a number 10 or 12 wire in it. This is 10. I'm sorry, this is 12. So I'll just check to make sure this is correct, that these go on here. They do. Okay. All right. So there's also red and blue ones. I believe the blues are the smallest ones. It's kind of for electronics. This is these are, as I said, 10 to 12. Now the yellow ones. And these get crimped onto the wire, which I'm about to show you. So what you need to do is peel back maybe 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. You don't need a lot. And on the cable, again, give it a twist. You just insert it, make sure all these strands go into the connector, and you'll feel it bottom out when the wire is all the way in there. Now, if you are just doing a few of these, this type of tool will work to crimp it. But if you're doing a lot of them, it is worthwhile to get a proper crimping tool. This one's I can't see it upside down. That's a Klein. Klein makes good electrical tools, and this ratchets. And you put the connector in the wire connector in at the appropriate color. In this case, yellow is there. And the advantage, and you put it on. If you see these, you'll see there's a little wider area at the very end of it. You want to put the crimp in that middle part right there. Make sure that it stays all the way, the wire stays all the way in when you're doing it. And then get on that part there and start crimping. Get in there, will you? Now the advantage of this, you'll have strong hands if you do enough of these. The advantage of this is it does not release until it is properly crimped. So if you don't go all the way, it will stop, and you won't be able to get it open. You won't be able to get the tool off. Right, so let's do the rest of these. If you're doing any automotive wiring or wiring on a boat or an airplane, you definitely want to use this. Do not use this thing on any airplane terminals. Wiring for airplanes, it's not reliable enough, and you do not want to have any wiring problems when you're in flight. So do not, make sure you use the proper tool for this. And if you're working on a but for any application, if you can afford to buy the proper ratcheting tool there, and do so. I think it was about $35 or so. They usually give you a little card which explains the wiring on it. And on this particular type of switch, the line comes in on the bottom and the power goes out to the motor on the top. So this is, let's see, let's not get these confused. This is our line coming in. So we'll just put those on. Oh, wait a minute. I got to do something else first. The ring is going to go on there, and this is going to mount to that. So I have to put this on first because I won't be able to get it over the device if I plug this in first, so got to do that. And the shut-off switch is always on the bottom. So, uh-oh. Okay. I just noticed I had an exposed, I don't know if you can see that or not, I have an exposed bit of conductor on there. That's no good. So I'm going to have to redo that one. We will, yeah, we don't want to leave that like that. I could put a piece of tape on it, but let's fix it. So we'll cut that off, and we will again strip this back. It's better to fix it than put the tape on it. I mean, the tape is perfectly safe, but there's no point monkeying around with it. So the conductor ends are cheap enough that wasting one is not a big deal. So let's fix that. There's some numbers on here labeling the terminals that don't mean anything. You might see L1 and L2, and that would be the line coming in. And then there might be some other designation for the other two terminals, but this one just has some numbers on it, which may have meant something to somebody, but didn't mean anything to us. And it should be a tight fit on there. I have to wiggle it a little bit to get them in. And after they're in, make sure that they're on there good. This up. I probably should have made the wires a little longer on this. Would have made things easier. It doesn't really matter, but for consistency's sake, we'll make sure that the whites are both on one side, the blacks on the other. As I said, it doesn't really make any difference, but functionally, yeah. All right, so that's on there. Just tug them a little bit, make sure that everything is good. And then what we'll do is we're going to screw this in to the box. Now, they did not give us any screws to mount this to the box. So the standard screws that hold switch plates on are 632. The 6 is the diameter, and 32 is 32 threads per inch. I got some longer ones just to make it easier to put this together. Probably 3/4 would have done, but I got 1/2 inch. So you can just get these at your, if you go to the electrical section of Home Depot or Lowe's or Menards or whatever you have near you, you should be able to find them. If not, just get some 632 screws that are the appropriate length. What am I going to do with my, oh, there we go. Lost my knife for a moment. And you'll have to get corresponding nuts for it because they won't come with it. The normal wiring devices you have for your home obviously come with the screws, so you don't have to go hunting for stuff. But in this case, and because this plate is set up like that, this requires a nut on the back of it. And normally you wouldn't have to worry about that if you're just doing regular house wiring, because there's a in a standard box for mounting wiring devices in your home, there is threaded holes for to mount the device to, but in this case we don't have that, so we're going to put these in here. What I'd like to do is stick them both in, stick both the screws in, and tighten them up. Just kind of snug them for the time being, and then tighten them properly after I got both of them in. I generally follow that policy when I'm putting something together that has more than one screw, because sometimes if you screw one down tight and there's a little misalignment between the holes on the other end, you'll find out you can't get the screw through. But so it's kind of a better policy to do that in general. one more look. Everything looks good. This is a proper 240 volt. Well, it'll work on 125 also, but it's 240 volt plug. Here's the prongs and everything else. Here is the wire. Here is the device, complete with fresh sawdust. And you will note that the two prongs are the same width. So that is there's actually three of them, because this can be set up a couple different ways. I think that's part of the clamp. We'll get to that in a minute. So actually, let's look at this. I feel extremely emasculated, but I need to look at the instructions and see what that little gadget is for. Alright, that is in fact the clamp. So different manufacturers may work differently. This is from Leviton. They always make good quality stuff. The oh, there we go. Okay. So how the clamp works, it goes in like that. This goes in like that, and then that captures the wire in there. So that just sits in the top half of the unit. I'm just going to go ahead and put some and crimp some ends on these rather than fight it. Let me just make sure of something and make sure I can get these screws all the way out. Sometimes they make stuff and they stake the ends of it, and then you can't get the screw all the way out. I don't have any spade terminals. I've only got ring terminals. Let's just make sure we can get this out. Getting it back in is sometimes a challenge. Let's make sure that'll go back in before we... Just make sure the screw will restart. We'll put that back on in a second. They usually... Oh, come on. Let's get this out of here so we're not fighting. Yeah, why not do it half-assed? It's more fun. So... They stake the ends so that the screw does not come out when it's before it's installed, just so you don't lose the screw. So sometimes when you take them out, they don't want to go back in. Let's make sure before we go any further. All right, we're good. All right. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to put a spade terminal on all of these, so I'm not fighting myself. Let me make sure the screw will go through that. The ring terminals are the safest to put on, because once you put the screw through them, there's no way the wire can come off. I mean, it could still be loose if you don't tighten it properly, but it may not. It's not going to come off. So you just, and it will release once it's all the way on there. Tug them anyway to make sure. Just check this to make sure I'm not making these excessively long. Yeah, that should maybe a little bit shorter. Configurations depending on where you are and what kind of application it is. So this allows you to put them in a couple different ways. But that is that's the configuration of the ground on the outlets I have. All right. Oops, I should have, before I stuck that in there, should have got this back together. So we just tighten that up. Since that's a ring terminal, that's not going to come off. Same thing with the other two. So once you got everything together, you just snap that in there. Oops. we go. And just close it. Tighten it up. And we're all set. Alright, so I plugged that in. Should start. So it started and shut off. Let me start it again and pull the plug out. And it should stop. What I meant to say is, of course it's going to stop, you pull the plug out. What I meant to say was when I plug this back in, it should not restart by itself because the magnetic function should have activated. So let's see. All right, and as you can see, the motor did not restart. So the power was interrupted because I unplugged it, plugged it back in, and now to get it going again, I have to start it back up. So if the power goes out at any time and I forget to turn this off, I don't have to worry about it if I walk away because it will continue to, it'll shut itself off and it'll stay off. So that's what the magnetic switch does for you. So that's the wiring on the jointer / table saw. Everything is operating. I can use the joiner for the project I need it for. When we do the full restoration on this, we'll have to disconnect everything because I'm going to need to take the motor off to paint it, and we'll need to take the switch back off, the mounting at least off of it, in order to paint the base. But for the time being, it works. So that's how you wire up a 240 volt switch, magnetic switch, and also got some tips in part 1 about how to deal with some old wiring issues on some machines you might buy. So thank you for watching. As always, thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you next time.